from this concept of kingdom stewardship. Protecting and expanding the assets of another, and the assets are all owned by God. But your job is to steward them, to manage them under his ownership, dictates, authority, and control. What is the legacy of this? Because maybe we haven't been good stewards. Maybe we haven't been kingdom-oriented. But you can have a long-range view, beginning now, to change the scenario of how you relate to God and how God relates to you as a kingdom steward. That's why I love the story in Luke chapter 16. Problem is outlined for us. Here's the situation. It says there was a rich man who had a manager, steward. And this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. So he was a bad steward. He was wasting his money. So the rich man calls the manager and says, give me an account of your management. Show me the books. And then he says, you can no longer be my manager. So the manager gets fired. So the manager, realizing he's losing his stewardship, the manager says to himself, so he starts talking to himself, because that's what happens when you lose your job. You start talking to yourself. He says, what shall I do? What am I going to do? I don't have a job. He's taking my management from me, verse 4 says. And I'm not strong enough to dig. And I'm too proud to beg. How am I going to make it with no stewardship, no management, no career? And that's the case of many people who find God no longer dealing with them because they have squandered their time, their talents, and their treasures. Is there still hope? Well, look at what happens. In verse 4, the gentleman says, I know what I'm going to do. When I'm removed from this management position, then I'm going to go into the homes of the folk who did business with my boss. He summoned, verse 5, each one of his master's debtor, everybody who owed his master money. And he began saying to the first guy, how much do you owe my master? He said, well, I owe him 100 measures of oil. He said, take the bill and quickly write 50. Cut the bill in half. He said to another, how much do you owe? Verse 7. He said 100 measures of wheat. He says, take the bill and write 80. Verse 8 is interesting. It says, and the master, the owner, praised the unrighteous steward. Oh, wait a minute, you're cutting my bills in half. But why are you praising the guy? Because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age, non-Christians, are more shrewd in relationship to their own, other non-Christians, than the sons of light, Christians. I say to you, so now Jesus is talking to his followers, make friends for yourself by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, when money fails, they will receive you into eternal dwellings. Now this is deep. The unrighteous manager went and made friends by cutting the bills in half, so that when he got fired, he had some place to go who would value him. You did this for me, maybe I can help you get a job. He made friends to deal with his poor management. In other words, he got future-oriented, but watch how? By his relationships. He made friends, it says. He built relationships. When he built these relationships, he could change his future outlook because of the relationships he built, even though he had the failure of mismanagement in the past. Unbelievers seize opportunities to progress in their lives through the relationships that they build. You cut deals on golf courses, big deals, and the purpose of the golf course is to establish the relationship. Jesus says that unrighteous people know how to do that when righteous people don't. How to build friends for eternal purposes. Because he says at the end of that verse, who will welcome you into eternal dwellings. So what is he saying? He is saying, develop an eternal kingdom perspective, moving on with your life, by impacting as many people as you can for eternity, which includes sharing the gospel with them and leading them to Christ, but also benefiting them. Do you know that Jesus said, even a cup of cold water given in his name, he will credit to your account. We've challenged our church. We have acts of service cards. We say, you put these cards in your pocket. Whenever you run across a person with a need, you try to meet that need, whether it's a homeless person, whether it's helping an elderly person cross the street, whatever it is, where you're asking nothing in return, you just see the need, you're prompted to meet the need, you're able to meet the need, so you meet the need. When you meet the need, however simple it is, then you offer to pray for the person. After you pray for the person, then if there's an opportunity, you share the gospel with them. Then you give them a card. That card simply says, this is an act of service by the member of our church, and if you need further help, please don't hesitate to call us. Now, why did we do that? We certainly did it to help the people who are being helped, but we did it for another reason, to create a mindset in our congregants to be servant-oriented and to make friends. Because when you make friends for eternity, that will help override the mismanagement of the past. What did the master do with the servant who made friends? He was now not condemning him for his past mismanagement. He was praising him for his shrewdness. So God has given us a way, a legacy way, an eternal kingdom legacy way, to be able to make friends for the future by our investment in people's lives, spiritually and financially for a spiritual purpose, because we're serving in good works, so that we have a legacy when we reach glory. And God says, well, for these 10 years, boy, you weren't a kingdom steward. It was all about you. But I see after 10 years, you pick this thing up and you begin to become a kingdom steward. You begin to prioritize me first. You begin to look after my assets. You begin to protect my assets. You expanded my assets, and you impacted the lives of people, and I am crediting that to your account. What I'm trying to say is you can change your legacy. Regardless of where things are now, you can change where they will wind up. When you recognize you are a citizen of heaven, that means that money becomes foreign currency to you. It's foreign currency because you belong up there. But for where you're living, it's necessary currency. He says, use the currency to benefit others outside of yourself with me in mind. Because you can just be a secular charity and leave me out and still do good things. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about things that have eternal connections to them, eternal dwellings. And when you do that, you're creating a different legacy for yourself when you stand before God, and he credits that shrewdness to your account. You cannot change the past, but you can transmutate the future. To transmutate is to change one thing into something else. You can change those relationships of serving others into currency God will use when you stand before him. That's transmutation. A kingdom steward is a believer who protects and expands the assets of the owner, and the owner is God, and he is the owner of everything. My favorite game growing up in Baltimore, Maryland, where I was born and raised, was Monopoly. I loved to play Monopoly because that was the first time in the hood that I got to own property. It's when I played Monopoly. Whenever I played Monopoly, there was one place I wanted to get on the board, and that was the Boardwalk and Park Place, because those were the two most expensive properties on the board. So I wanted those properties. If I got those properties, I became a real estate barracuda, because now I own some high-priced land. If you came on my side of the board and I had those properties, you better skip me, pass go, and collect another $200, because I didn't give loans. Then I put some houses, green houses on the board. That meant that the rent went up. Then I got it rezoned and put some red hotels on the board. So the property there is shooting through the roof. But there came that point in the game when the game was over. I was all excited during the game, but then the game ended. And the dice went back in the box. The cars went back in the box. The houses went back in the box. The hotels went back in the box. The cards of the real estate all went back in the box. And they closed the box. Game over. One day, all this will be over. And they're going to close the box. This life will end. When they close the box, the issue will then not be what you left behind. The issue then will be what you forwarded ahead. So use the things God has given you as a kingdom steward. But recognize it's what's forwarded ahead that you get credit for, not what's left behind. That's good for the will. That doesn't count in the glory. And if you want to know where the things wind up that you leave behind, take a trip to a junkyard. Those things were all nice at one point. Now, they just left for somebody else to do something with. Kingdom stewardship. Believers, protect and expand the assets of another. And the other is the God who created and owns it all. God bless you.